Love is in the Air by Manhattanite, read by M4BW. Chapter 2. Oh, Captain, my Captain. The elevator doors whooshed open on the 17th floor of Wells Corp, located in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, and out stepped the woman who was responsible for the company's very existence. Much of the space within that building was dedicated to the research and development of the woman's brilliant ideas and discoveries. When she wasn't working on things that improved the quality of people's lives, she was overseeing the legacy of the writings and inventions of the great H.G. Wells. She had dedicated staff for all of these departments, managed by bright and able directors. Each of them had the autonomy to steer their divisions as they saw fit, but everyone understood Helena Wells was the captain. The formidable figure dressed in haute couture sailed out of the elevator that morning and paused to look at her watch. There wasn't a hair out of place, and what little makeup she wore enhanced the obvious God-given beauty that was hers. She stood there, bathed in the light from the high-intensity bulbs overhead, and flashed a smile of bright white teeth. On the other side of the reception area stood Irene Frederick, who was the woman who made sure everyone towed the line, including the CEO. She noticed the expression immediately. It was the first time in days the HR director had seen Helena with anything other than a scowl. This can't be good, she thought. The only sound was the audible gasp from the new employee who had already been at her post an hour to receive instructions for her first day on the job. It was Wednesday, and she was the third person out of a pool of 5 candidates who had made the final cut for the position. The youth stared at her new boss. She didn't know enough about high-end couture to know that the white dress with black bodice, covered by a black wool blend peplum jacket, was a Narciso Rodriguez original made specifically for her boss. The outfit cost in excess of $2,000, and that didn't include the $600 black and white ankle boots that adorned her feet. Helena had decided upon her release from the warehouse that she would never wear pedestrian clothes again. It was a promise she made good on every day, and now her Central Park West closet was part of the course offerings for the Fashion Institute of Technology. Around Helena's neck was a gold locket containing pictures of the 2 most important people in her life. She carried a black Yelani Yepes leather pocketbook over her right arm that was bent at the elbow, exposing her gold Rolex watch on her wrist. On her left hand was a diamond ring so vibrant the sparkle could be seen at the other end of the room. She was a vision to behold, and it was easy for the new administrative assistant at the desk to see what everyone had been talking about. Helena Wells was more stunning in person than one could imagine. The CEO approached, and the young assistant stood up. "Steady," came the warning from the middle-aged director of human resources, in a tone that sailors used when bracing for a tempest. It had already been a stormy week for the staff at Wells Corp, with 2 people having jumped ship. Mrs. Frederick felt she had only herself to blame for the debacle. She could have pleaded with Myka not to attend the annual National Lawyers' Convention in Los Angeles, but knew that wouldn't have been fair. Myka had been invited to be a guest speaker at the symposium, an honor that Helena insisted she accept. It didn't take much convincing, as Myka had always dreamed of attending, let alone speaking, at such an event. Helena was only sorry she couldn't attend, but she was stuck in New York, still repaying the mayor for his generous favors by attending functions as his +1. Building your own private underground transportation system and not going through the usual channels came at a hefty price. Helena promised she would watch her fiancé when the talk took place. In fact, the company amphitheater had been set up so that anyone who wanted to could watch Myka Baring's speech at lunchtime. Myka's absence, unfortunately, coincided with Irene's job of finding a replacement for Helena's former administrative assistant, Eileen Sullivan. Irene had made Helena promise to give the top 5 candidates a week each before deciding which one she wanted. Even though the CEO herself was directly responsible for the spot being vacant after promoting Eileen to Assistant Director of New Projects, she wasn't one to embrace change. The first candidate claimed she was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder by lunchtime. Tuesday's employee never told Irene why he was leaving. He just kept mumbling, "Not for all the tea in China," as he left the building. The only connection was that they had both spent a short time with Helena. Helena feigned surprise and claimed she had no idea what could have gotten into them. Irene doubted that very highly. The HR director was a quick study, especially when it came to the woman she already could write volumes about. So when candidate number 3 started that morning, Irene knew she would have to run interference in order for the woman to last more than one day. The office pool had the maximum length of her employment at 6 hours. "Helena Wells, may I introduce Elizabeth Garner, your—" Irene was saying, when Helena glanced at her watch and rushed at the woman. "Yes, how do you do, Miss Garner? Welcome to Wells Corp," Helena said, extending her hand across the desk and shaking the young woman's hand vigorously. "I do hope you enjoy your stay here," Helena said, turning and practically pushing Irene ahead of her into the executive's office. "That's it?" Irene asked suspiciously, as Helena closed the door behind her after they entered the larger room. Helena was busy with her phone. "Pardon?" Helena finally asked, casting her pocketbook aside and whipping off her coat, flinging it across the couch. A habit Irene rolled her eyes at, but didn't move to pick up the article of clothing. "You just welcomed Miss Garner without so much as a glare," Irene said, because Helena believed in baptism by fire for any new employee. "Yes, yes," she said, waving her hand. Irene watched the Brit's eyes as sparks of excitement grew in them. Something was going on, of that she was certain. Helena had been mopey since Myka left for California 5 days ago. "Wait for it," Helena said in almost a whisper. Irene peered around the room, looking for whatever it was that her boss asked her to wait for. "Hell," she attempted to say, but was quickly hushed. Irene knew that look on Helena's face all too well. It was a combination of excitement and mischief. "What did you—" Irene knew to ask, but it was too late. The screams from the outside office were confirmation that Helena's plan was in force. Irene shot out of her chair and went straight to the door. The fact that Helena didn't move indicated to her whatever was going on was the reaction Helena was anticipating. Irene swung open the door just as a man was about to knock. He withdrew his hand and stood there. There was silence as Irene stared for a moment, wondering who he was. She didn't recognize him, and her eyes shot to the new employee who sat at her desk, still pointing at him with a frightened look on her face. After Helena and Irene had gone into the office, the new employee went back to her computer to begin work. She never heard the man get off the elevator, but when she moved her head, he was standing there, right next to her, and she screamed. He addressed her by name, then went straight to Helena's door, explaining that she had summoned him there. "May I help you?" Irene said, standing in the doorway now, her body language making it very clear that he would not make it past her in spite of his towering health and broad build. The man's head tilted slightly to the left, then to the right, all the time staring at Irene. A slight smile appeared on his clean-shaven face, and Irene watched his light blue eyes intently. He tugged at his jacket as if straightening out. Irene wondered how he got past security. He cleared his throat and finally spoke. "Hello, Mrs. Frederick," he said, even though they had never been introduced. "I am here to see Miss Wells. She requested that I arrive exactly at this time," he said, and his voice was smooth like glass, as if professionally trained. "Who should I say wishes to see her?" Irene said, and glanced over at the woman whose job she was doing. She didn't want to deal with rejection number 3 so early, but this woman had just let an unknown person get to Helena's door. "I am," he said in a friendly tone, "the man of her dreams." "You are like hell," the usually reserved woman blurted out because she thought he was being arrogant. "I am sui generis, Mrs. Frederick. It is a pleasure to make your acquaintance," the man said, bowing his head slightly. "I didn't know what to do," came the admission in a shaky voice from the front desk. The possibilities of what the young woman should have done were endless, and they flashed across Irene's brain. Stop him? Ask him to wait? Call Helena on her phone? Refuse him entry? The man stood there as if reading Irene's face. "You are confused." "I understand," the gentleman said, and the more he spoke, the more on edge Irene became. "I am nothing of the sort. Now, if you would be so kind as to state your business with Miss Wells, I am sure we can clear up this matter," Irene said, and wished she had shown Elizabeth how to trip the security alarm under the desk. She had decided that when the possibility existed that someone will only last a day on their job, security protocol could wait. "You are concerned that you did not show Miss Garner how to trip the security alarm, but I assure you no assistance is necessary," the uninvited visitor said, reading her facial expression accurately. "You better step back," Irene said, now in full protective mode, and Helena could hear the tension in her voice. The CEO didn't want it to go any further. "It's all right, Irene. Mr. Generous is here at my request," Helena said. Irene didn't move, but she turned to look at her boss. "As you can see, Mrs. Frederick, I am here because Ms. Wells wants me here," the man said, and Irene started to move back to allow him entrance when the oddest thing happened. There was a noise like an electrical zap, and the man fell down. The color left his cheeks. His eyes closed as he leaned against the wall and slid down until he was seated and slumped over. "Oh, bollocks," Helena said with her hands on her hips. "I was afraid of that." "Call 911," Irene shouted to the new receptionist. "Don't bother," Helena said authoritatively. "I could take care of this," she said, walking past Irene now to get to the man collapsed over on the floor. Irene stared at her, astounded. She was so calm. "Oh, yes, how could I forget that heart attacks are your specialty," Irene said, remembering how Helena treated hers with a shot of stem cell therapy. She went to assist Helena, who seemed to only touch the man's wrist, and he sprang up on his feet. "I am sorry, Miss Wells," the man apologized, as he straightened his jacket and then adjusted his tie. Yes, I know," Helena said, extending her hand to show him into her office. "Tell Miss Donovan to come here," Helena said to the woman behind the desk. Irene watched as the color came back into the man's cheeks. "Helena, who is this?" Irene tried one more time, and he stopped. "I am sui generis," he said, extending his hand to Irene. She finally took it and felt the warm flesh of a strong handshake. There was something odd about him that Irene didn't like. "Is that French?" she whispered to Helena when the man went ahead into her office. "Tisk," Helena clicked her tongue. "You've forgotten all your Latin already?" she said, shaking her head and disappearing behind her office door as it closed. In an attempt to make up for her faux pas, Elizabeth Garner quickly Googled the name, and when Irene looked at her, she quizzically answered, "Of its own kind, and hence unique in its characteristics?" Irene looked back at the door. "Now what has she done?" she asked quietly. Myka Baring could not return home fast enough for Irene.